Mark Few said he's unlike any player Gonzaga has ever had before. So what exactly will Khalif Battle bring to the Zags, and could it be the team's missing ingredient?
You are Locked On Zags, your daily podcast on the Gonzaga Bulldogs. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What is going on, y'all? Happy Wednesday, and welcome into the Locked On Zags podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I'm your host and longtime Gonzaga podcaster, Andy Patton, here to bring you news and updates on all things Zag athletics. Today's episode of Locked On Zags is brought to you by FanDuel. Folks, place your first $5 bet now, and you'll get started with $200 in bonus bets guaranteed. Just visit FanDuel.com today to get started. Well, folks, we are continuing our player preview series today. We're discussing every player on Gonzaga's roster, their history, how they ended up here in Spokane. We're also going to talk their best and worst case scenarios for this upcoming season. And then we close out the show talking about our expected role, expected production, their future, whether they have more years of eligibility left and they're going to be still in Spokane, or if they are out the door, what that might look like for them professionally going forward. We talked about Ben Gregg a few weeks ago. We talked about Dusty Stromer, Michael Ajayi. Now we are talking about one of Gonzaga's other newcomers in the transfer portal, Khalif Battle. Battle was a four-star shooting guard prospect from New Jersey. Out of high school, he was the 99th ranked player, which is also his jersey number this year, according to the 247 Sports Composite rankings. That was in the 2019 class. It was very jarring when I looked at 247 Sports and saw that he is officially from the class of 2019. That is a remarkable thing to see. He's entering his sixth season of college basketball with his fourth different school this year. He initially committed to Butler to join the Bulldogs. He had offers from UConn. He also had offers from Miami, Rutgers, and St. Joe's, among others, but he ultimately decided to start his career in Indiana with the Butler Bulldogs. But it wasn't a very long tenure with Butler. He was there for the 2019-20 season, 24 games, did not start any of them, only played about 11 minutes a game, was a freshman coming off the bench, as you typically see at many high-profile programs. Averaged 3 points and 1 rebound per game, shot a little over 30% from three. After the season, he decided to transfer to Temple to play in the American Athletic Conference with the Owls, and he spent the next 3 years at Temple. Now, in those first two seasons, he only played 18 games. Injuries really played a factor, have a significant part of Battle's history, even in the COVID era. We're not seeing a lot of guys playing their sixth year of college basketball. Obviously, injuries are going to play a part in anybody who's in that situation. That first year at Temple, Battle played 11 games, started 4 of them, played about 31.5 minutes per game, averaged 15 points and 6.5 boards, shot 31.5% from three. That was on 6.6 attempts per game. And I do want to highlight one thing when we go through some of these stats here. Battle's taken a lot of three-pointers per game. We've kind of talked about him as a not very good three-point shooter percentage-wise. He has been a historically high-volume three-point shooter, and I think that matters in terms of his actual ability to shoot the three-point shot and what it might mean for Gonzaga. In that first season, those first 11 games with Temple, he also shot 80% from the free throw line, attempting just under 5 free throws per game. The following year, 21-22 season, Battle only played 7 games. His numbers were amazing, but it's a 7-game sample. He started all 7 of those games. He was obviously in line to be a huge part of Temple's season. 32 minutes a game, 21.5 points a game, 4 boards, 1 assist, shot 58% on 2, shot 48.8% from 3 on 6 attempts per game. Again, this is a 7-game sample size. We're going to talk about another 7-game sample size, actually the most recent 7 games that Khalif Battle has played, but it is not worth jumping for joy at a 49% three-point percentage because it looks like that's it is his full season data on like Basketball Reference or ESPN or wherever. But again, the sample size is important context there. He also shot about 81% from the free throw line on 5 attempts per game. Then his final season at Temple, his only full season or almost full season, I should say, with the Owls, the 22-23 campaign, Battle played 27 games. with Temple that year, started 8 of them. So even in this situation where he was actually healthy, he was still not a full-time starter. He did play over 32 minutes a game. That's actually more minutes per game than he played in either of his first 2 seasons at Temple. In those 32 minutes, Battle averaged just about 18 points a game, 3.5 boards, 1.8 assists, and 1 steal. He shot just under 50% on 2-pointers. He shot 35% even from 3. That is on 8 3-point attempts per game. That is a huge volume of 3-point attempts. 35% is not great for a guard, but 8 attempts per game is an indication that he was chucking up a lot of shots. Some of them were probably contested threes. His usage rate was one of the top in the country. So again, I take that data a little bit with a grain of salt in terms of how much it reflects his actual 3-point shooting ability. And in that same season, Battle shot 89.8% from the free throw line, one of the top marks in fact, the top mark in the entire country in terms of percentage. That was on 4 attempts per game. After those 3 injury-plagued seasons at Temple and 1 season at Butler, Battle hit the transfer portal again ahead of last season, ended up transferring to Arkansas alongside every other guard in America. I feel like Eric Musselman added as many guards as he possibly could to last year's roster. It did not go well. Arkansas was a mess last year. There's reports of some internal strife, some player conflict, various things that happened there. Everybody left. The entire roster left. Eric Musselman left. He went to USC, back to his West Coast roots. It was a messy season for the Hogs in the SEC. And that kind of showed itself in how Battle's season went for Arkansas. He finished the season 32 games, 13 starts, 25 minutes per game, averaged about 15 points, 3.5 boards, 1.3 assists, shot 35.3% from 3, this time on a smaller volume, 4.3 attempts per game, but back-to-back seasons almost exactly at that 35% mark. And he was 87.3% from the free throw line on a massive 6.7 attempts per game. He was one of the leaders. I believe he was second in the SEC and 18th nationally overall in made free throws last year. 186 made free throws. I've said this stat on the show before, and I'll say it again. He made more free throws than Graham Ike took last year. Graham Ike led Gonzaga in free throw attempts, and I think Battle made 51 or 49 more free throws than Graham Ike attempted. That is how much of a difference maker Khalif Battle is in terms of getting to the free throw line than anybody who was on Gonzaga's roster last year. And the inconsistency at Arkansas in terms of roles, some guys kind of got elevated into roles and then benched and then brought back into the starting lineup. There was just a lot of strife and chaos, kind of had a role in Battle having somewhat of an inconsistent season as well. I don't think that his performance dipping and ebbing and flowing the way that it did is necessarily just a product of him being streaky and inconsistent. I think there is some streakiness in his style of play, but this is remarkable. In his first 12 games with Arkansas, Battle averaged 15 points, 3 boards, and shot 43.5% from 3. That was in 25 minutes a game. Then, across Arkansas's next 14 games, Battle's playing time plummeted from 25 minutes per game to 18 minutes per game, and his performance cratered. 6 points, under 2 boards, same 1.2 assists, but he shot 22% from 3. Again, some of that is having your role switch dramatically in the middle of the season. Some of that might have been related to the internal strife, but at the same time, a guy who shoots 43% from 3 for 12 games and then 22% for the next 14, that's streaky. That's what it is. We saw that with Ryan Nembhard last year. We've seen it with other players in the past, but that's a pretty dramatic difference for Battle in his first 12 and then his next 14. But what I really want to talk about, and what we've talked about on the show before, especially when he first committed, is those final 7 games. Because in the final 7 games of the season, which includes a couple of appearances in the SEC conference tournament before Arkansas was knocked out, Khalif Battle was given an opportunity to get back into the starting lineup and pretty much play every minute of every game. In the final 7 games, Khalif Battle averaged 38 minutes per game. That's making Ryan Nembhard sweat. 38 minutes a game in those final 7 games, and he averaged 29.6 points. Not minutes, 29.6 points, 6 boards, 2 assists, shot 35.5% from 3. So again, very consistent at that 35% mark. But over that 7-game stretch, Khalif Battle averaged making 12 free throws a game, not shooting 12 free throws a game. He averaged making 12 free throws per game. He got 12 points per game from the free throw line in those last 7 games. He had a 42-point game against Missouri. That was the first one of those 7. 36 points against Vanderbilt, 34 at Kentucky at Rupp Arena. He had 29 against LSU. The other 3 games were all over 20 points as well. A just nuclear hot streak for Battle to close out the season, to close out his career in the SEC. He hits the transfer portal like everybody else did at Arkansas last year, ultimately ends up committing to Gonzaga. Shortly before he committed, Luka Krajinovic, who up to that point had not entered the transfer portal and seemed like he was committed to staying at Gonzaga after a freshman year that had some injury issues, but otherwise was pretty positive. Krajinovic enters the transfer portal right at the deadline. Shortly after the deadline passes, Khalif Battle commits to Gonzaga. These two things are related. Krajinovic seems to be indicated. I don't want to speak for him or for his family directly, but it seems to be that he was instructed to enter the transfer portal, let's put it that way, that it was not necessarily their decision to do so, that Gonzaga wanted that scholarship opportunity to give to somebody who we find out shortly afterwards was in fact Khalif Battle. So kind of the not fun part of the college basketball experience. Krajinovic is back home in Croatia playing professionally in his home country. So hopefully things will continue to go very smoothly for Luka, who was an incredibly likable kid in his first year and only year in Spokane with Gonzaga. But now with Khalif Battle in the mix, Gonzaga's got a new look. And like I said in the opening, Mark Few has repeatedly said that Khalif Battle is unlike any player that Gonzaga has ever had before. So what does that mean his role is going to be? What is he going to be asked to do? And how might that come about in his final season of eligibility, in his first season with Gonzaga? We're going to talk about that through the lens of his best and worst case scenarios coming up here in just a second. Right after we talk about game time, because going to live events is the best. Whether it's a comedy show, whether it's a theater production, whether it's a concert or sports. College football's back, college basketball less than 3 weeks away. That exhibition game against USC is 10 days away as you're listening to this on the 16th. I'm looking forward to making a bunch of new memories this season at WCC Media Day, at multiple games this year. I'm planning to go to all the games in Oregon, some games, a game up in Seattle with Climate Pledge Arena, all sorts of fun stuff. Looking forward to it. And that's why I use Game Time. Because Game Time has a new feature called Game Time Picks that makes getting tickets for your favorite live events even easier. Game Time Picks filters out the fluff to show you only incredible deals on great seats so you don't have to waste time searching through thousands of different ticket options. Right now, Gonzaga, Kentucky, Climate Pledge Arena, tickets are on sale. You can get them right now on the Game Time website for just $64 a piece in the upper deck. That is a great deal. They have other fantastic deals on lower level seats as well. So folks, take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. And right now, if you download the Game Time app and create an account and use that code LOCKEDONCollege, you will get $20 off your first purchase. So again, create an account, redeem code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Terms do apply. Last minute tickets, lowest prices, guaranteed. All right, folks, segment 2, still Andy Patton, still Locked On Zags podcast, and we are still going through our season preview episode talking about Arkansas transfer Khalif Battle entering his final season of college basketball eligibility and his first season in Spokane with the Zags. As a reminder, this is our 4th episode of this series this year, and we've done them for the last couple of years. So those of you who are everyday listeners, longtime listeners, you know the drill. But we do best case within reason, worst case without injury. The worst case scenario for every player is what has unfortunately happened to Steel Ventures the last 2 years, which is a season-ending injury before your season begins. We're not going to discuss that as the worst case scenario because it's not very good analysis. If injuries are a part of a player's history, and they are with Khalif Battle, we will discuss them as needed, but not in the full sense. And then best case within reason. For a player who's, best case scenario is playing 8 to 10 minutes a game, we're not going to discuss, well, they could be the Naismith Player of the Year, the Wooden Award, the first pick in the draft. If it's not realistic, we're not going that direction. So let's start with Khalif Battle. Regardless of what role he plays, and we will talk more about that in the third and final segment, the best case scenario for Khalif Battle is that he leads the team in scoring. It is 100% within the realm of reality that Khalif Battle is this team's leading scorer. That could be as a starter. That could be as the 6th man. It's not common for a team to have their 6th man be the leading scorer. It does happen. If I'm not mistaken, I believe Jackson Robinson led BYU in scoring last season while with playing for Mark Pope. He's now at Kentucky. I think he's probably going to start for the Wildcats this year, but it's something that does happen. And there is reason to believe that Battle could be the sixth man and could also be at or near the top of the scoring for Gonzaga this season. The best case scenario for Khalif Battle is that he plays 30-ish minutes a night and scores 18 to 20 points per game. We've seen him do that. He was 15 points a game for the whole season at Arkansas, but was better than that for huge chunks of the year, just had that big lull in the middle of the season. We saw him get up over that at times at Temple, although, again, he didn't put together very many full seasons with the Owls. But in an offense with more spacing, in an offense with, frankly, more talent, this team has more floor spacing and just a more spread out offense than Arkansas. And this team has more talent than any of the rosters he had at Temple or in his first season at Butler. We're going to see Khalif Battle thrive. The best case scenario for Khalif Battle is that he is the best version of himself offensively because of that confluence of factors in a system that is more tailored to his skill set and with teammates who are able to better space the floor and give him more room to operate as a driver towards the basket, as somebody who is fantastic at getting to the rim. This offense, I think, suits him very well. That motion offense should allow him to get downhill pretty easily. And frankly, against WCC caliber defenders, they're not going to be able to stop him from scoring without fouling him. Mitchell Saxon, maybe. The new big at San Francisco, Carlton Lingard, maybe. But at the end of the day, this is a league where Khalif Battle should be able to get bucket after bucket after bucket, whether he's getting them at the free throw line or getting them at the rim, or in a lot of cases, probably both, as somebody who's going to finish through that contact and get to the stripe as well. In addition to that, the best case scenario for Khalif Battle is that we see that improvement as a three-point shooter. I have often coined the term the Ryan Woolridge effect. Longtime listeners, you're chuckling because you've heard me say this a bunch of times. Battle fits it really well in the sense that he is a player who has shot decent but not great from the three-point line, often in situations where he is the primary scorer for his team. That is what Ryan Woolridge was for 3 years at North Texas, where he shot about 32% from three. He came to Gonzaga where he was the fourth or fifth option offensively and shot 42%. Malachi Smith had a similar glow-up as a three-point shooter. Rasir Bolton had a similar glow-up as a three-point shooter in Gonzaga's system. Considering Khalif Battle plays the same position, it makes a lot of sense that in a different offense, he would be unlocked as a three-point shooter. Is he going to move up a full 10 percentage points and shoot 45? I don't know. I probably wouldn't have projected Malachi Smith to shoot an even 50%, but he did. So it's possible. More likely, Battle shoots something like 42%. But if he can be in that level of three-point shooter, it's not going to be he's not going to shoot 8 three-point attempts per game like he did at Temple. But if he's shooting 4, 5 three-point attempts per game at 42%, along with his ability to put pressure on the rim, he's going to be one of the best offensive players in the entire conference. Best case scenario for Khalif Battle is that defensively, he can hold his own, especially in the WCC. He's not going to be the team's defensive stopper. That is not going to be the role that he is asked to fill. There is some question mark about who in the backcourt is going to be asked to play that role, but it is not going to be Khalif Battle. The best case effectively for him defensively is that he's not a liability, that Gonzaga can shield him in the right matchups, and in certain matchups, they don't even need to because, they're playing Pacific or San Diego or somebody like that. The best case scenario for Khalif Battle is that he is the WCC Player of the Year and that he is a legitimate All-American candidate. And this could happen with him coming off the bench, in which case he would be quite clearly the WCC Sixth Man of the Year. Somebody winning WCC Sixth Man and WCC Player of the Year would be quite hilarious. Probably not as funny as somebody winning WCC Player of the Year and not winning WCC Sixth Man of the Year. I'm not sure if they would be able to justify that, but I think there's a reality where Khalif Battle is that level of player while coming off the bench. And the best case scenario for Battle is that despite his age, he gets real attention from NBA scouts and NBA general managers because of his size, because of his scoring ability, and because he looks like the best version of himself playing for Gonzaga. What are the worst case scenarios for Khalif Battle? Well, as with any transfer, it's an adjustment period to a new role. And in the worst case scenario, it takes too long. The worst case scenario is that it really never happens, that he never fully finds that role. We've seen players struggle with that in the past, even very talented players. Malachi Smith took a while to find his role. I continue to use him as an example because I think that they're very similar players in some ways. Stylistically, they're a little bit different, but they're both players who are high usage guards, bigger guards who are now coming into Gonzaga, likely to play a bench role. The worst case scenario for Khalif Battle is that he just doesn't click. He doesn't click with his teammates just on the court. I don't know about off the court, but he doesn't find the role that vibes with him in this setting. He's not able to get to the line as often as last year. Maybe he's driving to the basket. He's not getting the whistles. He's not drawing the contact. He's not finishing around the rim. He just becomes a fairly inefficient offensive player, especially if in a worst case scenario, he also doesn't see a boost as a 3-point shooter. There is a reality, a bleak reality, where Khalif Battle's like a 32% 3-point shooter, and he's not generating as much pressure on the rim as he was able to do at Arkansas. And it creates a situation where, because he's also not a very good defensive player, he becomes a bit more of a challenge to play those 25, 28, 30 minutes per game. And instead, he's playing more like 22. He's getting replaced by Dusty Stromer in the rotation, because Stromer is offering more defense and more floor spacing, which are vital to Gonzaga's success. Defensively, Khalif Battle's a turnstile in a worst-case scenario. He's forced to guard the opposing team's weakest player, and maybe you get away with that in the WCC, but you don't get away with that against UConn and UCLA and Kentucky and San Diego State and anybody you play in the NCAA tournament. Injuries are a part of Khalif Battle's history, so I do want to acknowledge them, but he has played 59 games in the last 2 seasons combined, so they're not a super relevant recent part of his history. So ideally, they won't come into play, but it is worth acknowledging them at this point. And then the worst case scenario for Khalif Battle, he's not an all WCC member. He's not even on the second team or even an honorable mention. He is not on anybody's NBA radar, and his college basketball career ends a bit more of a whimper than expected, especially after such a hot finish to his season last year. Well, the big question, and I touched on it a little bit, but we'll get more into detail on it now. Is Khalif Battle going to start? What does that lineup look like? How much does he play? What do we expect his production to look like? All that coming up to close out the show here in just a second. Right after I tell you folks about FanDuel. NFL fans, you can start the season with a huge return from FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Right now, when you get a hunch in the middle of a game, you can check out the latest stats, view live play-by-play, and so much more, all on the same page where you placed your bets. And now you can get started with $200 in bonus bets guaranteed when you place your first $5 bet. And folks, Wooden Award odds are live at FanDuel right now, and Khalif Battle on the list, plus 17,000 are the odds right now on Khalif Battle. Yes, I didn't mention Wooden Award as an option, but if you think I'm wrong, and you think Khalif Battle can be the Wooden Award winner, $5 bet. Not only do you get $200 in bonus bets, whether that bet wins or loses, if it wins, you get $850. That's over $1,000 with the $200 in bonus bets if you bet on Khalif Battle for Wooden Award finalist right now. That's FanDuel.com, America's #1 sportsbook. All right, folks, closing out the show, finalizing our player preview episode discussing Khalif Battle, the former Butler, Temple, and Arkansas guard who is now spending his 6th and final season of college basketball playing for Mark Few and the Gonzaga Bulldogs. We're going to talk about his expected role in production and then his future outside of his time at Gonzaga. I said it already, and I'm going to say it again. I believe Khalif Battle is going to come off the bench. Not everybody agrees with me. Blue Ribbon's recent projections for the season have Khalif Battle as a starter. I have seen many other very reputable, very hardworking people who make college basketball projections for a living who believe Khalif Battle will start for the Zags. Mark Few, of course, has not said anything, nor is he going to say anything about this until the season begins. But I believe that Khalif Battle will be the 6th man starting the season. To me, Ryan Nembhard, Nolan Hickman, Graham Ike, locked into starting spots. All of them started every game last year. There's no reason that Mark Few would not start all 3 of those guys every game this year. There's just no reason to even really have a debate about it. That leaves the other 2 spots. In my mind, it'll be Michael Ajayi at the 3 and Ben Gregg at the 4. Ben Gregg is the most likely to end up coming off the bench, where you'd have Ajayi playing the 4 and Khalif Battle playing the 3. I think there are a couple reasons this won't happen. One, Mark Few not rewarding a player who has put in the work that Ben Gregg has done in this system, a player who turned Gonzaga's season around when he entered the starting lineup last year, a 4-year veteran who is a emotional leader, a just team leader, a lead by example, and a gritty, hard-nosed, dive-on-the-floor type player. Mark Few has historically always rewarded those players. Ben Gregg deserves to start. That's not to say talent-wise that Khalif Battle is undeserving of a starting spot, but Khalif Battle has played 101 career college basketball games. He started 32 of them. This is a player who is already familiar with coming off the bench. This is already a role that he is comfortable with. Coming to Gonzaga and entering the starting lineup would also create a situation where 40%, 2/5 of Gonzaga's starting lineup would be new players. Last year, having a starting lineup with a lot of new players did not go well for the Zags. They struggled early in the season. Part of that was because the two most important positions, the 1 and the 5, were starting positions that were new with Ryan Nembhard and Graham Ike. That won't be the case this year as both those guys are back, but I don't think Mark Few wants to start 2 newcomers when he can start 1 in Ajayi and have Battle play a role that he is already familiar with coming off the bench. Having said that, I think Khalif Battle is going to play more than your traditional bench player. Mark Few does not play his bench much. Usually, Ken Palm does rankings where you can rank what percentage of a team's overall minutes came from the bench, and they're sorted, 1 to 361. And usually, the Zags are in the 330s, 320s, outside of the top 300. Mark Few does not play his bench much. Having said that, teams like Kansas and North Carolina and other teams typically are at the bottom of that list as well. It's not necessarily a flaw, just a product of when you have really good players, you play them a lot of minutes. But I think that's going to be a little different this year. I think Khalif Battle is going to play something between 25 to 28 minutes per game. I think they're going to play a lot of 3-guard lineups with Nembhard, Hickman, Battle, and then either Ajayi or Gregg at the 4, and then either Ike or Braden Huff at the 5. I think they could go very small and play both Ajayi and Gregg at the 4 and the 5 and play the 3-guard lineups. I also think they could go a little bit bigger with certain lineups and play Ike or Huff at the 5, Gregg at the 4, Ajayi at the 3, Battle at the 2, and Nembhard at the 1. But again, Hickman played like 34 minutes a game last year, so I don't think there's going to be a ton of lineups where he is not on the floor. I think the best comparison for Battle in terms of role and production is probably Malachi Smith, but I would consider Battle kind of a beefed up Malachi Smith. Smith played about 21 minutes per game for the Zags and averaged 8.7 points a game. Let's just kind of extrapolate both those numbers up a little bit. If Battle were to average 26 minutes a game and 13 points, that feels like kind of just the exaggerated boost that you would give if Malachi had played 26 minutes for the Zags. He probably would have been around 11 or 12 points. Battle, 27 minutes, 13, 14 points. That all feels about right to me. I think you will see him have the best full season as a three-point shooter of his career. Again, he shot 49% in that 7-game season. But outside of that, I think Battle shooting 37, 38, maybe he approaches 40% from 3, feels like the more realistic outcome. I don't think it's going to be a huge part of his game. I would expect 3-ish 3-point attempts per game, maybe 4, somewhere in there, but a better percentage because those looks are going to be wide open. He's not going to be taking contested 3-point shots like he had to do at Temple and even at Arkansas at times. He's going to be taking wide open 3-point shots, 2 to 3, maybe 4 of them per game. And I think that results in him shooting closer to 40%. I also think the incredible free throw shooting and rate that we saw from him last year more or less continues. I don't know that he's going to get 7 attempts per game, but I think a reality where he makes 5.5 free throws per game, shoots close to 90%, is among the country's league leaders in free throw percentage and total free throws made. That all feels very realistic and likely. Mark Few keeps alluding to the fact that they've never had a player like Battle because of that rim pressure and ability to get to the line. Mark Few's not talking about that with the intention of not utilizing it. He's bringing it up because that's something that they value in Khalif Battle's profile that they want to utilize, and for good reason. Him getting to the rim consistently forces defenses to defend the rim. It forces them, it potentially puts people in foul trouble. It often forces defenders to leave three-point shooters, which could then result in more open shots. Battle's got to be able to, drive and dish, which is not necessarily his strong suit, but I think he will be good enough to be able to do that in situations where, say, he's driving to the hoop. Ben Gregg's man is rotating over to try to help contest the shot at the rim. Battle kicks it out to Ben Gregg. Ben Gregg wide open in the corner from three is pretty much money. Those are the kind of situations I think Khalif Battle's presence improves the team, even if he's only getting an assist as opposed to getting actual points out of that situation. I think Khalif Battle's the WCC sixth man of the year in a landslide. If he truly does come off the bench this year and puts up numbers anywhere close to what we are projecting, 25, 26 minutes, 12, 13 points, something like that, he will be the WCC sixth man of the year. That is almost undebatable. Without even a single game being played, that seems like a reality that we can kind of get behind. He also would pretty likely be a WCC first teamer. Sometimes there's Gonzaga voter fatigue, and if Graham Ike makes it and Ryan Nembhard makes it and maybe Michael Ajayi makes it, then maybe Battle gets relegated to the second team, which would be kind of bogus, but we've seen that before, so wouldn't exactly be a shock. But he should be an all-WCC contributor. He should be WCC sixth man of the year, and I think that's what we see from him in his final season. The future for Khalif Battle, yeah, this is his final year, and no doy, it's his final year. He started playing college basketball in 2019. There are not a lot of players. There's some, but there's not a lot of players still playing college basketball whose first season of college hoops was pre-COVID. There's not a lot of those guys left, but Battle is among them again. 24 games as a freshman, 11 games, 7 games, 27 games, 32 games across the last 5 seasons. A lot of injuries, lots of ups and downs. Fourth different team. He's one of, I think, 15 or so players in college basketball who is about to play for his fourth different team and his final season of eligibility. In terms of his NBA future, he's got good positional size. 6'5", 185 is a solid size for a two guard in the NBA. It's not huge necessarily. There's a lot of point guards who are at that size or a little bit bigger even. But for Battle, it's more the advanced age. He's going to be one of the oldest prospects in this draft class. And frankly, the skills that most NBA teams are looking for right now are consistent knockdown three-point shooting and high-level defense at the point of attack. Khalif Battle's not particularly great at either of those things. He's great at getting to the rim. He is great at drawing contact and getting to the free throw line. And don't get me wrong, those are valuable skills in the NBA. A lot of people watch the NBA and think that that's all that it is players trying to drive to the basket, flailing around, getting to the free throw line. Those people have watched a lot of James Harden in the last decade plus, but that is a part of the modern NBA. But players who do that thrive because they can also hit three-point shots. If Battle doesn't have a consistent three-point shot, he's not going to get a lot of NBA looks. I don't see Khalif Battle getting selected in the NBA draft. Currently, the mocks that I have read, the top 100 big boards that I have read coming into the season don't have Khalif Battle on the list. And while there's always tons and tons of changes, the amount of sixth-year seniors who aren't on a preseason big board who then play their way onto the board doesn't happen very often. So I do not expect Khalif Battle to be selected in the NBA draft. I wouldn't be surprised if he gets a summer league invite, if he gets some real looks, especially if he has a fantastic shooting season for the Zags. But ultimately, this is a roster that has a handful of players who I do believe will be NBA players, but I'd be fairly surprised if Khalif Battle was one of them. It's going to wrap it up for me today here on the Locked On Zags podcast. Folks, thank you so much for making the show your first listen or your first watch of the day. And guess what? When we're back next, we're going to be at WCC Media Days. We're going to be talking to folks around the West Coast Conference, players, coaches, hopefully commissioners, all sorts of fun stuff. It's going to be fantastic. Myself, Zach Farmer, the host of the unofficial WCC Hoops podcast. Check that out. Thursday show, Friday show, might even be some of the episodes next week as well, depending on how many interviews we're able to secure. So definitely check that out. Cannot wait to get down to Las Vegas and have these conversations. Thanks again for listening, folks. And until next time, as always, go Zags.